great. Alright, I'll give you a proper review. Hello everyone, my name is Derek and welcome to the Netflix Knowhow, the review show here to help you stop browsing and start watching. So, Stranger Things, the little geeky show that could, and the newest addition to the celebrated culture of nerddom. We're only 2 seasons in and already the show has developed more momentum than a freight train barreling down Mount Everest on tracks lubricated with WD-40. I wonder if that would make a good pitch for Speed 3. So, how does the second season stack up? Does it live up to the anticipation and the hype set forth by the much lauded first season? The short answer, oh yeah! Not only does Stranger Things 2 cement itself as a worthy successor to the first season, but it does so by expanding upon and exploring the world and the characters that we have already come to know and love. In short, Stranger Things 2 is bigger, better, faster, and stronger than ever before. With one small exception, and yes, we will be discussing that giant pile of elephant dung, but before we get to that, let's talk about all of the great things that make this season so awesome. The cast. All of the characters from season 1 returned for season 2, and just like last time, the cast does a phenomenal job. David Harbour puts in yet another gruff but vulnerable performance as Town Sheriff Hop. His story delves deeper into the traumatic events of his past and explores the relationship that he had with his family and specifically what happened to his daughter. I said it before and I'll say it again, I am okay with this man taking over the role of Hellboy. Millie Bobby Brown returns as Psychic Mutant Child 11, and we get to see her go on a journey of discovery as she navigates life away from experimental imprisonment. Nancy and Jonathan continue their weird PTSD-fueled will they won't they dance as they attempt to blow the whole lid off of this big cover-up that happened at the end of last season. Mike, Dustin, and Lucas are back in all their nerdy glory, and this time they get to deal with all kinds of angsty hormonal teen drama. In a completely unexpected twist, Dustin actually makes the transformation from nerd bro elite sidekick all the way to charming scene stiller and leader of the pack. Gotta be honest, I did not see that coming, but I dig it. Steve gets the crap kicked out of him again. I'm beginning to sense a pattern here. In all seriousness, Steve actually gets one of the funniest and most heartwarming side stories of all the characters, and I would go into it in a little more detail, but I think the internet has already done a pretty good job of it. Really though, this season is all about Will. You know, they really should have called this season Stranger Things 2 Will Byers Sees Some Shit. I can just imagine how the pre-production meeting went between Noah Schnapp and the Duffer brothers. So Noah, I realize we didn't give you a whole lot to do in the first season, but don't worry, we've given you a whole lot more screen time in season 2. Oh neat, that sounds fun! Great! How do you feel about having a seizure every 15 minutes? All jokes aside, Noah Schnapp as Will Byers, give this man a medal. If there were any doubts about his acting ability after the first season, I can guarantee that those are all demolished with this season. The whole season is basically just me yelling, no, why? Why are you doing this to Will? No, stop, it hurts my soul. We also have a few new characters to add to the lineup, including a new hubby for Winona Ryder, played by Sean Astin. Sean Astin, Mr. Samwise Gamgee himself, is basically impossible not to find endearing, and he brings the perfect level of dorky charisma and warmth to the character of Bob. Bob is one of those characters that could have very easily been the equivalent of getting flower pollen thrown in your face, but thanks to some very good writing and Sean Astin's natural charm, he is absolutely adorable. He has just the right amount of nerdy energy and eagerness to be likable without dipping into obnoxious territory, and the fact that he just willingly accepts all of the crazy things that are going on around him and even volunteers to help with it is just... You'd be crazy not to love this character. Bob is amazing. We could all use a little more Bob in our lives. That's all I'm saying about this character. We also got a new addition to the nerdy brat pack, Maxine Mad Max Mayfield, played by Sadie Sink. She is initially presented as a stereotypical tomboyish troublemaker who is better than all the boys at the things that they're supposed to be good at, but just as with all the characters in the show, she is so much more than that. She also has an older brother who is the living embodiment of the sleazy high school bad boy. Yes, he's a jerk. Yes, you're going to want him to be mauled by some demigorgons. And yes, they make sure to turn even him into a relatable, empathetic character by the end of the show. I almost think that the show creators are challenging themselves to take the most obnoxious, annoying character stereotypes from the 80s and create fully developed, relatable human beings with them. And if that's the case, they are knocking it out of the park. Okay, I know I've talked a lot about the amazing cast and the wonderful characters, but what about the story? Season 2 takes place 1 year after the events of the first season, with most things having returned to normal in the small town. Will and his friends are together again and being just as nerdy as they were before. The town is nice and calm and relaxed, and the experimental government facility is keeping its business to itself. Or so it seems. Suddenly, Will starts having visions, the Upside Down starts creeping into the real world, baby Demogorgons start popping up all over town, and 11 goes through the most pointless, rebellious phase ever. Again, we'll get to that last part in good time, but first, the good. Stranger Things 2 does what any good follow-up should do, in that it takes what it was given from the first season, it expands upon it in the second season, and then it sends us down some new and exciting paths to look forward to in the future. I don't really want to get into too much detail about it because everything is integrated so well, and I feel like anything that I tell you could potentially give something away, but just know that season 2 is just an absolutely massive and immersive adventure. One thing that they did that I really liked is they gave each character their own sort of unique path and story arc, especially the characters that didn't get quite as much love in the first season. Since we already know most of these characters, they didn't have to spend as much time setting them up, and now we just get to see them go on adventures. There is an arc between Hop and 11 as they develop this sort of father-daughter relationship, and it is heartfelt and touching and sad, and it is easily the best one in the whole show. There's the introduction of Maxine into the nerd group, which brings up all of these great themes of jealousy and insecurity and trust and loyalty, which were explored also in the first season when they met 11, but I think that it's actually done better this time around. Dustin even gets 2 romance stories in this season. Granted, the first one is a romance with a freaky new pet monster, and the second one is a bromance with Steve, but hey, you know what? They're still awesome. I'll take it. Nancy and Jonathan go on a journey to expose what actually happens to Barb from the first season, and in turn, bring the whole system down.
This makes me want to burn this motherfucker down. Come on, Boogie, let's burn this motherfucker down! Boogie, let's burn this motherfucker down! Let's burn it!
Hop tries to play superhero and almost gets himself killed. Joyce and Will both have to go through some crazy exorcist type shenanigans that drives both of them to the very brink of insanity. Even the plot involving the new doctors at the facility is interesting and engaging. Yes, after the events of the first season, there is every reason in the world not to trust these people and give them the stink eye at every opportunity you get, but it's very apparent that they care about what they're doing and they're trying to correct the sins of their past. It's really nice and refreshing to see that the bad guys don't always have to stay the bad guys. Things can change, things can shift, and it's really cool to see that they genuinely care about the mistakes that they made and they're taking steps to try and prevent them from happening again and to help Will in this whole process. The most impressive part about all of this, aside from the fact that there are so many great stories going on, is that every single one is laid out in the very first episode of the season, and it's done so in such a way that you want to pursue all of these stories. We get just enough information to set everything up and to point each character in a certain direction, and then it just hooks you in and it pulls you through the entire season. Season 2 sends you down so many paths and twists and turns, and just when you think you might end up lost and overwhelmed at the brink of it all, it pulls it all back in at the end in a crescendo so spectacular that it would make even Beethoven blush. This show as a whole and this season in particular are so good, and you can watch them over and over and over, and you are never going to get tired of these characters and these stories because they are that great. Also, the sound. Oh my god, the sound. I completely forgot to mention this in my review of the first season, and I have no clue how that happened because there's no excuse I shouldn't have talked about it, but the sound and the music of the show is unbelievable. I mean, listen to it. I could just sit here and play the entire soundtrack and you would know exactly what emotions and what things are going on in the show and what you're supposed to feel just from the sound and the music. It's that good. This is going to be a pretty bold statement, but I am quite positive that Stranger Things has one of the best scores for a television series I have ever heard in my life, period. Why do I not own this soundtrack? Excuse me for a minute. Oh yeah, that hits the spot. I guess we have to do this part now. Duffer Brothers, what the f is up with Chapter 7? Yeah, there's a reason I haven't talked much about 11's specific arc up to this point. Again, I can't really say too much without giving it all away, but the main gist of it is 11 has daddy issues, so she runs away, and then she goes on a bad girl binge, and what results is the most strangely awful and pointless episode in the entire series. It was a strange thing to witness indeed. Anyway, if you want to keep your virgin ears innocent, go ahead and skip ahead to this point in the video. Otherwise, spoilers. Very, very angry spoilers. It's kind of weird talking about this episode so far after the fact because, to my knowledge, the entirety of humanity despises this episode, and for very good reason. So here's the rundown. Season 2 opens with a car chase between the police and a bunch of street thugs running away in a van. Long story short, what happens is the thugs go through a tunnel and then the tunnel collapses behind them, causing the police cars to pile up and they're not able to chase them further. And then we cut to the inside of the van and we see a girl inside the van with a nosebleed, and then it cuts back to the cops and we see that the collapse was just a hallucination. The important takeaway from this is that the girl in the van is implied to have powers very similar to 11 and presumably given to her by the very same people that gave 11 her powers. It's a great way to open the season, totally unexpected, and opens the doorway for all kinds of new possibilities in this world that they've created. Remember that. Now, 11's arc begins with her living in a cabin in the middle of the woods with Hop, who found her in between the events of season 1 and season 2. Even though she has technically escaped from the government and is free from their grasp, Hop won't allow her to go outside and explore because he knows that they are still looking for her and he doesn't want her to get caught by them. So she's basically being held prisoner against her will again, except this time it's kinda more like being permanently grounded because of circumstances out of her control. I don't know if it's the correct way to handle the situation, but I know that Hop is doing it with the best intentions in mind. Now, obviously this does not sit well with 11, and the fact that Hop is also kind of a terrible surrogate father, even if he's not trying to be, does not help matters in the least. Okay, so that's all set up in the first episode. Now, flash forward 6 episodes. We don't see any more of this psychic girl we saw in the first episode. We barely get any mention of how she is connected to 11. And then 11 runs off to try and find her. Now this by itself is fine. I don't know if it's the most interesting thing or the best thing they could have done with 11's character, but it's fine. The problem arises when 11 finally meets this girl at the end of this series, and voila, we have finally arrived at the infamous Chapter 7, The Lost Sister. So we get this whole episode of 11 going through essentially an accelerated version of her rebellious anarchy phase, and she joins up with this street gangs that we saw in the very first episode led by her lost sister. I would tell you the lost sister's name, but I don't remember it. It's probably not a good sign when I can remember every other side character's name in the show, but not this one. They commit some crimes, they steal some stuff, they try to get revenge on the people that experimented on them, and then 11 realizes, this is not the way. This is not who she is, this is not who she wants to be, so she packs up her bags and heads on back home to her friends. Case closed, end of story, problem solved. Psychic sister girl goes her own way, and the implication, as far as I can tell, is that we are never going to see or hear from this character ever again. What the f was that all about? To be fair, I get what they were trying to do. The whole reason that 11 runs away in the first place is because she feels abandoned and betrayed by the people that she was close to and that she thought she could trust. And it takes meeting some actually very bad people to make her realize that this is not who she wants to be and this is not the path she wants to be on. I get it, on paper it makes sense, but holy hell, this is like the worst way they could have gone about it. The entire episode amounts to what is essentially a story dead end. It has no connection to the rest of the plot, it doesn't fundamentally change anything, and worst of all, it goes absolutely nowhere. It would be like if 11 was walking down a road, and then she turned down another road that just ended immediately, and then she turned back around and continued on her way up the other road. What was the point? It's completely unnecessary. The worst part about it is that they started season 2 by teasing this subplot. They introduced a new character with a cool power and everything, and they made you think that this was going to be a very important integral part of the show, and then they did absolutely nothing with it. They might as well have just started the show off with a clip of Barney and Friends and it would have had just as much relevance as the way that they did start it. It just really sucks because I actually do like what they were doing with 11. I liked the particular arc she was given. I liked the idea of her becoming, well, not evil, but of her essentially being tempted to forsake humanity and use her powers only for selfish purposes. I thought that this was a really good idea, especially because she is still a young child and even younger developmentally because she's been trapped in this government facility. It could have been a really deep and thought-provoking exploration of her character, but instead it just comes off feeling kind of like a really bad piece of fan fiction. You can literally remove the entire episode from the season and you would miss nothing. They should have just scrapped the sister character and that plotline altogether and just kept her focused on the characters that she was developing a relationship with last season. There was nothing that was accomplished through that subplot that could not have been done better and more seamlessly with the elements that are already put in place for this season. It's just really sad because when I reviewed season 1 of Stranger Things, I only had 2 complaints about that season. And if you watched my review, those weren't actually complaints, they were just me being a sarcastic butt because I wanted to accentuate the fact that I did not have any complaints with that show. Yet here we are in season 2, which is still fantastic in every other way. And it's just so disappointing to be having to sit here and vent about the fact that I have a very real and very legitimate complaint. If you haven't watched season 2 yet, all 10 of you out there, just do yourself a favor and skip chapter 7. You're not missing anything, I promise. Okay, rant over. Honestly, I could go on for days, possibly even weeks, about how great this show is as a whole, and especially season 2 in particular, but I think I've fawned over it long enough for now. If you liked season 1, you're going to like season 2, and if you haven't seen any of it yet, you need to get off of YouTube right now and go watch it. Seriously, go do it. Stranger Things 2 is a near perfect example of everything that a follow-up should be. I say almost because had it not been for that one huge glaring flaw, this would have been probably a flawless season. I know that I had a pretty spectacular breakdown about the infamous chapter 7, and the only reason I'm so critical about it is because I know that this show is great and the people behind it are great and they're capable of much better things. Rewatch season 1, go watch season 2, and I cannot wait to see what they have in store for season 3. Stranger Things 2 gets a huge thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I know that this episode took a little bit longer to get out, but as you can see, I had a lot to say about it. So seriously, Stranger Things is great. If you haven't watched it already, go watch it right now. It is a fantastic show, one of the best to come out in several years. Anyway, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. You can also head over to Facebook and over to Twitter and follow me on there. And as always, if you want to know your flicks, you know where to click. Happy hunting, guys. See you next time.